Hey everybody. Boy, we were almost done. Week 14, short week for you. There's no study assignments or discussion boards or written work. The only thing I want you to do is to get your paper polished up and get it turned in. It's open, the Dropbox, so you can start filing them anytime you want. And then with you know 60, 80 students, 100 students close to in papers, the sooner the better. But of course, this isn't about me. Um, let's talk a little bit about technology. And it's a big um, a boon to law enforcement, but it's also got some real serious implications behind it. I think besides in-car computers and the radio systems back in the 70s and 80s were a huge advance. If you live in Fullerton and you go by the police department, there's a big tall tower in the police department, and on top of that is a red light. Well, when I was a little tiny baby policeman, that still worked. And you'd look up, you would see the light, and you would call the station to see if you had a call for service. This was as the initial countywide uh, police radios were coming into vogue. That's changed now into a trunk system, and technology has advanced radio communications quite a bit, giving lots of options to officers who want to communicate car to car or with other law enforcement people in the entire county, dispatch centers. So it's pretty wide open. Uh, but the next thing that came along was the MDC, mobile data communications, the computer in the car. Again, really good. You could drive down the street, pull up from behind someone. I was in and out one evening, and I was going to get my double fries, and well, you know. And I was sitting there waiting in the car in front of me. Yeah, just didn't look right. I ran the license plate, and the car in front of me had a felony warrant attached to it. So I didn't get in and out that night. Guy drove through. I stopped, said, "Hey, I gotta go." Drove through, stopped the guy, and he had a robbery warrant. So it's kind of a big deal. But now we're moving into all kinds of other stuff. Facial recognition software. We have a tracking ability, the ability to put those two things together and basically electronically follow somebody for their day once they get out in public. And we've seen all the weird stuff with the home systems where somebody will say something, gosh, I would really like new carpet, and then all of a sudden they start getting advertisements on their email for carpet, and it comes from these home systems. So here's what I want you to get from this for this week, which you're going to see this. The first thing, most important thing, is just look at the different technologies. The next thing that I want you to think about, there's a lot of people in this class that are going, God, I'm not really sure if rolling around with a drunk guy who's trying to take away my gun and kill me at 4 o'clock in the morning in an alley by myself is my idea of a good time. I'd still like to be in law enforcement in some fashion. Yeah, sorry. Didn't look at the time before I started. Someday I should show you the clock. It's pretty cool 110-year-old clock. In any event, I don't want to do that. But how do I keep in law enforcement? Think about crime analysis. There's a short thing in the book about crime analysis. It doesn't do CA much justice. But this is a practitioner's point of view, person that was very active working with CA. First off, if you become a police officer, and you go into crime analysis, the first thing is check your ego at the door, because they're a lot smarter than you are. To do well in crime analysis, you have to have a good foundation in theory. You also have to have a foundation in operating computers. You have to have analytic skills. You have to be able to understand what numbers mean when they're put into a picture of occurrences. So Cal State Fullerton has a CA program, it's a certificate program. You pretty much got to have a certificate from them or another, big school in that area, in that area of study, before you can get hired as a crime analyst. Over the years, when CA was first coming along, I probably helped maybe 6, 7, 8 people, 10 people get jobs in crime analysis. A couple with the agency that I worked at, and they were all the ones that I got going that direction were the very best students. Most of them actually went on from there, went to law schools, and a good number of practicing attorneys now. So kind of a brainiac area. So let's talk about the two types of crime analysis. You'll see this on the final, big deal to me. You have strategic analysis and tactical analysis. Strategic analysis is looking at things such as overall crime picture, crimes per 1,000 of residents, the types of crimes. Are they going up? They're going down. What's happening with budget? What's happening with hiring? What's the experience of the agency? Is it a young agency? Is it an old agency? If it's a young agency, then there's going to be some prosperity, but little movement, making it kind of hard on officers who are working one assignment for a long period of time, and sometimes not an assignment they like. If it's an older agency, well, the downside to that is that younger people are going to have a chance to take jobs as officers, detectives, managers retire, but you're losing that institutional knowledge. Things that that somebody knows, and you can't. That just doesn't become instantly replaced. That has to happen over the course of time. So that's strategic analysis. Tactical analysis is talking about individual crimes, crime patterns. Where do you have a series going on? And identifying a series is a pretty involved process. It's not just a matter of going, well, gosh, we've had 3 auto burglaries at this apartment complex. It's got to be the same guy. Well, not necessarily. You've got to compare time of day, day of week, the temporal issues. You've got to compare type of loss, how was entry made, where was the vehicle parked, any characteristics of the victim, any victimology kind of things that you need to be aware of. And it's a pretty expansive checklist of things when you're trying to determine whether or not a crime is part of a series or if it's just a crime which has occurred in a time frame. So that's one of the things tactical analysis does. When I first started, we had a big map and with push pins in the map, and we used to call them cops on dots. So you would take and you'd see a bunch of dots, so you would put more cops there with the hope of impacting that crime through proactive policing. Sometimes it worked, often it didn't. I know of one crime series of residential burglaries that went on for years, and only with the development of crime analysis, tactical analysis, and a really good investigator that was just top notch, were they able to identify somebody and finally arrest them and put them in jail. This guy overcame alarm systems, overcame video, overcame SIPTED kind of things. He took advantage of poor crime prevention through environmental design, but he also, was astute enough to know when there was a motion detector light and would disable that light, especially if it was reachable. So, that those kind of people can just go on and on and on. And this went on for, like I say, I'm going to say probably close to 20 years. And no good part of on my part, but I worked a lot on that case and came up with nothing, not even a good stop on the guy. It was terrible. So, strategic analysis and tactical analysis. Most feel that tactical analysis is more fun. It's the kind of stuff that you like to do. The strategic analysis is more of the numbers as far as bean counting, and that. Take a good look at crime analysis. One of the things talked about in the book is geographic profiling. And they do a terrible job of geoprofiling, but it's incredibly interesting. And what it does is it takes some of the theories of the Brantinghams out of Canada and another Canadian, Kim Rosmo, who now is at Texas State, I believe. And it takes Branningham's theories about how people act. And Rosmo, in your book, says crooks just act like people. They do the same things. They have the same patterns. And if you can identify those patterns, then you can put yourself in the place where those people are. And geoprofiling is one way to assist in that. And by looking at how a particular problem is proceeding. So think about crime analysis. Could be a really good gig for you. If you get into it, you enjoy the computer-based, the looking at numbers and understanding theory and applying theory. The last thing I want to talk about is the real downside of technology. And that impacts you and everybody. And that's loss of privacy. The case that really came, I'll go back just a bit. When I worked narcotics, when I worked drugs, I worked a special detail. We did with other agencies, we worked financial investigations. And we do a lot of surveillance. And the first big technological breakthrough for us was the helicopter. And using the helicopter to follow the person, we could stand off, helicopter tell us where they're going. As soon as the bad guy stopped or term of art landed, then we could close in and then surveil them from a distance. They got back in their car, they drove away, helicopter picked them back up, and then we could get back and not worry about getting burned. That was a big technological advance. The next thing was cameras. And one of the warrants that was discussed really briefly in this course is the sneak and peek warrant. Well, federal warrants could allow you to enter a building unbeknownst to the owner of the building and place cameras in that so that you could watch what was going on. And several big cases happened that way. And then as GPS came into being, we now had a new tool, which was the tracker. And initially GPS was set to be off by, I want to say like 25 or 30 feet. And the concept was that if it was off a little bit, somebody else could break into the US GPS system and use it to target military operations. That was the idea. Well, as other nations came on along with their own GPS, now GPS is extremely accurate. So what came from that were vehicle trackers. And here's the theory behind it. If a person's outside of their home, outside of a building, outside of a private place, and they're inside a vehicle, and they're driving down the street, it's got windows, people can see in, you can follow that car manually with officers or even with just people, for that matter, and that to be cops. they're not in public. And if they don't have that expectation of privacy discussed in cats, well then people, don't have or the government can do things to exploit that. One was trackers, and that went along fairly well. Some states began to require, through their own statutes, require that a warrant be obtained before officers did any tracking. Now that was hit and miss from place to place. And an example of that was in the case United States versus Jones. It was 565 U.S. 400, 2012, 565 4 SU 100, 2012. And what happened in Jones is this guy is dealing dope, and he uses his wife's car quite a bit when he's doing that. So the cops get a warrant through District of Columbia, through Washington, a federal warrant. Remember, the feds in D.C. do the policing there. That's a federal area. It isn't a state, although there's a movement now to make the 51st state. Didn't do well, I don't think, at the polls, but that's being considered. Has been for several years, actually. So the cops get a warrant. They never find Jones's car in a location where they can put the tracker on. So they follow it for 6 or 7 days. Finally, he drives into Maryland, I believe. And I don't believe Maryland has a requirement for a warrant. So they put the tracker on in Maryland. He drives back into D.C. A couple problems. First off is, and most important, is the warrant in Washington is expired. They had a limited amount of time. They could put it on 5 or 10 days. And they didn't meet that. They did get a warrant, which is one thing that's kind of overlooked in this case as far as the importance, was the cops just weren't out there running around nilly-willy or helter-skelter. They were actually, doing stuff and doing the right thing. But the warrant expired. They put the tracker on in a state that doesn't require it. Guy goes back into D.C., drives around for a while. They get information. He gets arrested, goes to trial, and he complains about that. Well, the court is realizing the dimension of data that's available to law enforcement, and the fact that with trackers and computer databases and facial recognition software, that the police now have a significant capacity to surveil people. London, England, I looked at the statistic, 650,000 video cameras in the city of London. In 2025, 5 years-ish, they're expecting to exceed 1 million video cameras. So truly, when you go to London, you are not alone. And you know yourself, California, walking around, you go to the mall, go to a Best Buy, go to a restaurant, you're not alone. There's a lot of video out there that's recording you all the time. Now, most of that is private, so the Constitution isn't implicated. Remember, the Constitution deals with federal government. Now in Jones, in U.S. versus Jones, the U.S. Supreme Court came down and recognized the issues and now requires nationwide a warrant for this type of surveillance. And based on probable cause, that the information that the officers will get will help identify or further the case in a felony. So that's Jones. These are the things that I want you to get. One is the different technologies, all the way from the advanced radio systems to facial recognition software, which is probably the biggest improvement in the technology. but know all the different kinds that the book talks about. Crime analysis. Think about it as a career. It's a really good job. They're really good people. You're not there at 3 o'clock in the morning unless there's some big case. You can call in. Basically, it's a 9 to 5 job. It's good work. It's steady work. You're actually, as a friend of mine would put it, you're solving crimes without a badge. And pretty good gig. Geographic profiling. A part of crime analysis, one of the techniques that they utilize. Third thing, U.S. versus Jones, implication on technology. It's going to be a really tough balance between individual freedom and crime suppression when it comes to the idea of technology, because technological advances are just so, absolutely incredible, and they occur more and more every day. Okay, short week, no assignments. Hope you have a good Thanksgiving. I'm certain many of you are going to be working Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and or Sunday. I can sympathize with you. I did that for many, 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 many years. If you're having time with your family, I hope it's a good time. If you're having to work, I hope you take a little bit of time to think about the things that make your life better. That being said,